Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to show you how to use Blender to make models for Ghost Recon. This is really a beginner tutorial here. I'm going to show you how to use the user interface and different little features and how to edit geometry. It's not rehearsed or anything, so we're just going to go through it piece by piece, little by little, and get you making some stuff. Now keep in mind that everything in Ghost Recon needs certain kinds of topology. Things that work in newer games don't necessarily translate well into older games. And GR really likes basic geometry for the most part. So you can certainly create things here, but when you take it from Blender, put it into 3D Studio Max, and then export it out to Ghost Recon, you might run into a little bit of problem with this workflow if you're not familiar with the requirements of Ghost Recon. So let's just jump into this. Blender is free. You can go to blender.org, download it. This is Blender 2.9 here. And I'm going to just jump right on into it. So mouse wheel in and out, zooms in and out. Middle mouse button will let you orbit. And shift and middle mouse button lets you pan around. So those are kind of your quick, easy ways to get around. There's a lot of different little tabs up here. And we'll talk about UV editing later on. But usually you're going to be using like either layout modeling or UV editing. And sometimes maybe texture paint. But, you know, it depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. So moving on. Now that we're in here, you can left click on objects to select them. So this is the basic default cube. This is a light, and I'm going to left click on that. That's the camera. You can see they're all up here in this cool little list. And you can also hold shift and left click to select multiple objects. So you're going to be using shift, control, and alt usually for selection methods. You have this little selection box here. You can actually change it around. So you can use a selector box. You can use a selector circle. Or you can use a select lasso. So you can do these kind of things. Fun stuff. All right. Now everything in 3D space, of course, has 3 axes. So you got X, Y, and Z. Okay. So the X one being red, Y being the green one, and then Z being up and down, which is blue. You can certainly select different objects and kind of mosey over to them and zoom in on them. You'll notice sometimes it's hard to get them just right, but a quick little way to navigate just by orbiting around is you look at an object, place it in the center of your screen roughly, and then orbit a little and place it back in the center of the screen. That's going to get you pretty much keyed in on that object. So you can kind of pan around and do that to different things. You'll see if I orbit here, it goes out of view. And if I do that one more time, it still goes a little out of view. You got to do that, 3 or 4 times or something like that. And usually you're right on target. There are other quick little options here. If you press the tilde key, whoops, you have a left view, a right view, top, front, back, bottom, and also view selected. And if you go into these views, you're going to notice it changes to right or left or top orthographic modes. So these are like blueprint views kind of. If you use the middle mouse button, you can actually just orbit right back out of it. And if you ever get lost and you don't know where you're at, and you want to look at something specifically, you can select that object, such as the cube, press the tilde key, and then view selected. It'll take you right to it. This works in edit mode as well, so when you're making changes to geometry, you can select different parts of the model and actually view those specific areas as well. There's a Z key, which is the same as these buttons up here pretty much. You're going to have a solid mode, a rendered mode, and a material preview, and a wireframe. It can be pretty useful. Keep that in mind. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into edit mode. You can press the tab key to go into edit mode. And if you notice here, I'm going to edit preferences, key map, tab for pie menu. So when I hit my tab key, I get this cool little pie menu, and I go into edit mode that way. I like using that more than just hitting tab and going straight to edit mode. But all your modes are up here, and you can see object mode and edit mode is what we're going to be focusing on for this one. All right, in edit mode, you have these 3 selections: vertex, edge, and face. You can use number pad or the keypad here, the solid row of numbers anyways. 1, 2, and 3. You'll notice I can toggle between those real quick. And so I can select the vertex, the edge, or the face. All right, now that's going to give me all the things I need to pretty much start modifying this geometry. All right, so there's sub-menus here. There's vertex, edge, and face. These have a lot of different options for modifying your mesh. There's also some more controls right here. A lot of this is not really that complicated, but it helps to have a little bit of an explanation of each thing. I'm not going to do this or do that in this tutorial because there's quite a bit to talk about, and things like shading and normals and weights and all that kind of fun stuff. I might go over a little bit of that, but there's a lot of different aspects to 3D modeling in Blender. So whenever you select an object, a face, vertex, or whatever, if you right click, you see that you have these little context menus, face context menu. If I switch to edge, it's now edge context menu. If I switch to vertex, it's now a vertex context menu. Pretty easy to get to that. Also, Control F, Control E, and Control V will select these three right here and pop them up. So if you ever see this menu pop up, Control E, and I'm selecting edges, V, okay, or Control F, E, and V. So that's how I do that. All right, now I'm going to swap quite a bit between the vertice and the edge and the face as a model, making changes to my geometry. Those are important hotkeys to keep in mind. It's almost like you're gaming, you know, most of your left side of your keyboard is going to be the most important thing anyways. We're going to go back into object mode. I want to talk about objects. If you notice, there's a object here. There's all kinds of options here. But there's another one, add. You know, if I add, let's say, a cylinder, you'll see that I've created a cylinder here. It's now inside that cube. If you check this out, everything you do in Blender, usually, if you're modifying something or creating something new, has this little tab down here. You can enlarge that, and you can make changes to whatever it is you're creating. So in this case, I'm going to change the radius. I want it to be, you know, a little bit bigger of a diameter there. I can change the depth, and also the amount of vertices that go around on the side here. So you can see that it's a 3-point cylinder right now, 4, 5, 6, etc. And Ghost Recon, like I said, geometry doesn't need to be real detailed. So anything over 8, you know, you may or may not need to use that many things for a cylinder, that many vertices or that many faces, unless you're doing something for a level perhaps. But like weapons and stuff, usually not much more than, I think 12 is the highest I would go for most things. I usually stick to 8 or 6 if possible. And on occasion, for certain level design aspects, I'll use 4 and just turn it sideways so that it looks more like it's a cylinder instead of a square. You can rotate and move things by using these little guys over here. You'll see that it brings up this little gizmo, and you can actually grab that and move it left or right or up and down or whatever the case may be. You can also rotate it by grabbing the colors you want to rotate on, and you can also scale it. I use hotkeys for these, and the hotkey to move is G. It's a little bit confusing at first. It's like it should be M maybe, but no, it's G, and it'll actually let you move it around. You'll notice that if I move it around without setting any parameters for it, it kind of moves where it wants. It doesn't stay, you know, it moves based on how you're viewing it. So it's moving based on where the camera is. Oh, let me go back here. No, go back. Did they change the undo, redo thing? No, it's Control Shift Z. Okay, well, I guess I lost my cylinder. Anyways, so you can move things around pressing G, X, G, Y, or G, Z. All right, that's going to let you move up and down, left or right, or, you know, etc. But you can also do that with rotation, scale. So you can see I can scale in one direction, I can scale in the other direction. Pretty easy, right? Okay. Now, here's the trick. You can press R, Y, and then type in 90, and it will rotate it 90 degrees. Now, it's a cube, so it doesn't look like it did anything. But if I press R, Y, 45, you'll see it does that number like so. So, you know, sometimes I might use a cube to look like a cylinder in Ghost Recon. That's just something to keep in mind. You don't really need a lot of faces for a lot of things. So I jump back into edit mode. Now I can actually use that to move my faces and stuff. So I can press G and Y, and I can make this bigger. Or I could select this and press G and Z and maybe move it up. And you can see it kind of skews it out and whatnot. But maybe I want to select all the way around this guy. So you can hold Control, and this is the shortest path selection tool. I'll explain it again a little bit later, but a lot of times I'll use Control and just kind of nurse around objects. It's kind of the way I do things, but you can also use Shift and select around it real quick. Not a big one, but there's also a quick way to do this. It's called selecting loops. If I was to press Alt and left click on this. It kind of has a little, it's called a loop when it goes around it. I'll give you a better example. I'm going to press Control R and create an edge loop. This is in face mode right now. So I'm going to mouse wheel up, create 2 of them. You can see I can slide them around. I can right click, it will place it in the center. So a loop would be something like that basically. And it works on cylinders or most geometry as long as it's got parallel sides to it. So if this is got the same amount of vertices as this side and the topology kind of flows in that direction, it'll actually let you create a loop. Sometimes it won't work. That's just generally because you have like a triangle at the end or an n-gon or something else, and it's just the way it works. So you'll have to play with that to kind of get used to it, or I can make another video all about edge loops, which really isn't required. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out. So you can select that whole section going around it. One of my favorite tools, of course, is extruding. So if I was to grab just one face and I pressed E, it would extrude like so. Okay, and that's the extrusion. That's how you extrude, right? I want to mention something real quick about this. If you were to press E, if you were to grab a face and press E, and then say you didn't want to do that and you right clicked, it created 2 faces now. Because what it does is it creates a face and then it starts to move it. So what you do is, if you look here, if I grab one of these vertices, I press G, you'll see that it's actually got 2 faces there. So a quick way to clean up any kind of doubled up areas is by selecting everything. You can do that by pressing A, selects everything. And if you want to deselect everything, press A twice, real quick. So that's how you do that. But when you select everything, just press M, and you'll see that you can merge vertices together. And I do it by distance. And the option I usually keep really, really low. If I need to merge them and they're a little bit farther away, I'll tell you how you do that, but it's pretty important. All right, so we're going back to extrusions. And if you just press E, it extrudes like so, right? But if you have multiple faces selected and you press E, it extrudes all crazy like. So what I will do is I will press Alt E and then bring up the extrusion kind of menu here. Alt E is the quick way to do it. And extrude faces along normals. And this is going to allow you to just kind of expand outwards, which is pretty cool. But sometimes it doesn't do exactly what you think it should do. It might make things look a little bit weird. Try checking offset even down here. And sometimes it'll make a little bit of a difference on how it's going to behave. You can also, anytime you do a modification like that, you can always change the amount of the offset or anything else that's going on if you're beveling or something else. Just keep that in mind as well. So what is beveling? I'm going to select edges here, press Alt, left click. You can see that selected that area. Now I'm going to press Alt, Shift, and left click, and then you can see I selected the other side there. So I can actually now press Control B, which if you take a look, Control E here, or if I right click, bevel edges, Control B. There's all kinds of little shortcuts for different things, so keep that in mind. I usually use shortcuts, but these menus is where you're going to find all this extra stuff you can do. So Control B allows you to bevel, and I can mouse wheel up to add bevel amounts, like different edges here. You can see how that works out. GR being a simple game, you don't need a lot of bevel action going on, especially for level design. You know, the lighting in GR for levels is not that great. Characters and vehicles and weapons can handle beveling a little bit better because they're kind of dynamically lit, whereas the level is pre-baked. It's kind of an interesting thing there, but we'll go over that in future tutorials with specifics about level design or weapon design or whatever the case may be. But you can see that you can bevel those. You can also bevel a vertex. It's actually a little bit interesting here. There's a shortcut key for it, but what I normally do is just press Control B, and you'll see that when you press Control B to bevel it, nothing happens. Then just hit V, and it'll allow you to bevel that vertex itself. Okay, anytime you create mesh that has more than 4 points on it, it's considered an n-gon. This here, of course, has 4 points, so it's not an n-gon. But it is very possible to accidentally create n-gons while you're working with topology. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to use a knife tool, which is pressing K. You can see I can select that edge, cut here to there, and press enter. And you'll notice that I got this crazy geometry going on now, and it doesn't make much sense. This has now become an n-gon, all right? And I can move these things around. But this has nothing it connects to. Try to avoid doing this as much as possible when working in 3D. This is really going to create some issues for you because what's actually going on right here is that everything is made of triangles. So if you were to, of course, it's not going to show it there, but if you were to take this and let's see if I can actually do this real quick. We're going to triangulate faces, Control T. You'll see everything is actually created like this. So Control F is how you do this. I'm not recommending you to do it, but keep in mind, everything is made out of triangles. So they're just kind of hidden when you are creating n-gons and weird topology like this. So you don't actually know what's going to go on. You got to kind of look at it to tell where that triangle is being created. Just keep that in mind. All right. Anytime you do create something that you don't want to see, perhaps, like maybe I just want this to be one big n-gon, I don't need a point here. I can, instead of deleting it, if I pressed X, I could delete things, but I can actually dissolve them instead. So if I deleted it, it would do that number, create a big hole. X will dissolve vertice. And what will happen is you'll see that it automatically creates that edge right there. And then so now we got an n-gon, and the triangle is being cut in one of two ways. It's going out either down here, or it's going over there, or maybe it's going across right here. So you never know how your triangles are going to behave on an n-gon. So try to make sure you're using a flat surface when you do that. If you do create n-gons, try to make sure they're just completely flat. You can flatten faces out pretty easily. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but moving on. Trying to get you started here. Sometimes you might want to take a vertex and place it exactly where another vertex is. There's a couple different ways you can do this. There's something called sliding. You press G twice, either with a vertex or an edge, sometimes faces. You press it twice, and you can actually pick the direction it goes in. And that's going to allow you to slide it to that one and bring it down there. So maybe you want to slide things around a little bit. You can do that. Now, once again, because we slid it, it's actually not attached to that other vertex. So pressing A, M, merging by distance, pretty useful. There's another little way you can do things is using snap tools. Up here you have your snap button. All right, you can turn that on and off. There's a hotkey for it if you want to use the hotkey. I never do, just because I like to remember that I'm turning it on and off. And sometimes I get a little ahead of myself using that hotkey, so I don't do it. But you can snap to either in increments using vertex, edges, faces, or volumes, all kinds of other fun stuff. So check this out. It's an increment right now. If I press G and then X, and I hold Control, it's going to move it in these little incremental snaps. Now, if I hold Control and Shift, it's going to do smaller incremental snaps. Okay, just keep that in mind. If I right click, it doesn't move it. If I left click, it would have moved it, of course. Now, moving it by the vertex though, I can turn vertex snap on, and I can turn this on or off if I wanted to do it all the time. So if I turn it on, I press G and move, you can see I can snap this to anywhere that there's a vertex. If I right click, it'll cancel it. I don't really need that. A lot of times I will just leave it off and I'll press G and move around and do whatever I need to do. But if I do need something to snap, I will hold down Control, and that's your kind of like temporary snap key. So you can see how that works out. And once again, it won't collapse it down. Here's a fun trick though. Up here in the top right, there's an auto merge vertice button, vertices, and you turn that on and you click options. You can see the threshold for it. I like to make it much smaller so it doesn't accidentally merge things that I don't want to get merged together. And so if I was to press G and hold Control, I can now snap that there, and it will become only one vertex. So it automatically merges them. That's pretty useful. You don't have to do it manually. You can just have it turned on automatically. It's up to you. I actually prefer doing it manually. I don't know why. I just do. But so there's all these different cool little features. Let's move on to the next one. You can select faces here. You can press I, and it'll do an inset. And you can see how it's insetting right now. It's really just going at it from the two selections of the faces there. You can also inset individual faces. So if I press I and then I one more time, I can now inset each face individually. These kind of things are pretty important. And you'll find them quite useful. And then you can, of course, do your extrusions along normals and get kind of results like that. So you can create crates or whatever else. Now, Ghost Recon really likes flat faces if you're doing level design. But for weapons and stuff, you might use this. I don't know. It depends on what you're creating and how you create it. All right. So that's the basic kind of tools I usually use to create models. There's a few other probably different things that I could show you, but I mean, they kind of pop up in certain situations. I can't just think of them offhand for some reason. Oh, maybe you want to like mirror something. Oops, sorry. Maybe you want to mirror something. I'm gonna press Control, go back in edit mode. Press Control R here. You'll see that I can create an edge loop across this like so, or like this. So I'm going to create this edge loop, and you'll see that creates it all the way around. So sometimes if something's symmetrical, I don't need to work on both sides of it at the same time. It's kind of pointless, right? So what I will do, and if I need to select through this model, you'll notice I select these vertices, but it doesn't select the back side of them. So sometimes you got to see through your mesh. There's this little button up here that says toggle X-ray, and the shortcut is Alt-Z. Try to remember that shortcut because you'll use it quite a bit. So Alt-Z makes it transparent, and just try to find where you need to make your selection. Press X, delete vertices, and voila. Now what you're doing is you're able to create this mesh, and maybe you want to mirror it over. Here's the trick about this. You could use a modifier to do this, or you can do it in edit geometry. It's kind of weird how this works, but just bear with me here, all right? So if I select this mesh and I press Shift D and I duplicate it and then right click, it's still been duplicated, but I can actually go up here to Mesh, Mirror, and we're going to try it on Y. Okay, you can see I actually mirrored it, and I can press G, Y, and then now offset it over here. You can move it fast. Oops. You can move it fast by pressing G and Y, and if you need to be careful moving it back together, you can hold Shift down and it'll move smaller amounts, just like snapping. All right, and so you're not going to get this perfect little line up between these usually, and this is where it gets interesting, because now we have these set right on top of each other. I'm going to only select those, and I'm going to press M, merge by distance. You'll see it removed 0. You can actually bump this amount up for things like this, and you'll see that it removes 4 at a certain point. You just want to be careful with what number you're using there, because once it merges, it will merge anything. Like if you had extra details somewhere else, if you make that increment too large, you're going to start breaking down your mesh. So for example, if I press M, merge by distance, and I start bumping up the values, you can see things just start automatically kind of merging together by distance. So you want to be very, very careful with those kind of things. All right, I just put it back to where it was. Now that's just one way to create a mirror, or mirror an object. That's in edit mode. Sometimes you'll find that really useful. You can always grab mesh and duplicate it out as well. You'll find this useful as well. Shift D, X, like I just showed you. You can do this for a lot of different things. You can create like a plane of mesh. Now, something real careful I want to mention is that this does not have a back. I mean, it has a back face, but in game, you're not going to get that effect. So what you need to worry about is this. Click this little arrow here, back face culling, right? And you'll find this happens quite a bit. So this is transparent and see-through. That means there's no normal there. And this is the actual face that you want to see. So if we're going to modify that later, we'll talk about it. But it happened over here as well when we mirrored it. So it's just something that occurs sometimes. You can select the whole mesh, just like all the faces here. Go to Mesh, Normals, and recalculate outside. Will normally fix the problem. Normally. Sometimes it won't, like you can see down here. Okay, so things like this can be a little bit annoying, but you can select these and you can actually just go to Normals and flip. And you can manually change these back around. Make sure they're working. These are really the big things you're going to face when you start modeling anything inside of Blender or 3D Studio Max or whatever the case may be. A lot of times things like this will happen. Okay, you can also try the other kind of like automatic generation options here. So Mesh, Normals, recalculate outside, recalculate inside, flip, set from face, all kinds of fun stuff there. So you got to kind of play around with those a little bit. Nonetheless, let's go over here. There's probably something that hasn't been correctly done over here. That's probably why it's doing that. But if I was to press Let's select everything, press M, merge by distance, see if anything collapsed. Maybe bump it up a little. No. All right, so it should have calculated outside. You can also press Control F, I think. And face data, no. Right click? No, you gotta go to mesh. I thought there was a hotkey for that. I just don't remember. Shift N is a hotkey for outside. So we'll just flip that around real quick. All right, so we got the mesh fixed up. It's working technically correctly. Little pieces of mesh like this. I'm gonna view this selected. All right, you can turn these into objects. I know it's just an empty plane right now. It's not a closed object. Sometimes you'll get away with things like that for GR where you can leave them as empties. But sometimes you want to extrude them out and turn them into a shape. So you can just, quickly select the faces and extrude, or extrude faces along normals and do something like so. All right. I want it to go this way. So when I do that, you can see it inverts everything. Now we have two objects right now. You can select different objects by pressing L. So that selects that object. And then if I press L again, it'll select the other object. I can actually press Shift L and deselect them. So if you ever want to modify just one piece, just keep that in mind if your mesh is exploded or it's separated. We're going to go to normals and flip, and it should take care of everything there. Okay. Could have tried recalculate outside. It probably would have worked as well. Now these are two objects in one piece of geometry. So you see we're still working with cube. If you were to create other mesh, you certainly can do that. And sometimes having multiple objects, you can certainly find use for that in some instances. So you might be working on like the barrel of a weapon, and this is like the trigger or something. Whatever the case may be, breaking it down into different objects is very useful. You can hide objects by either clicking on this little eyeball here, or by just selecting it, pressing H, or you can select it and press Shift H, which hides everything else. Sometimes, you don't accidentally delete objects, so just keep that in mind. Press Alt H, it will actually unhide everything. So if you select everything and hide it, and press Alt H, it will all come back. You can see we have this. We don't need these, we can delete them. Let's go into edit mode here. We do have two objects in edit mode. So we're gonna, as part of one entity, so we're gonna press L on this one. Let's say we want to separate it out so it's a new object. I'm gonna press P and then separate the selection. Okay, I've separated the selection. It became a new object. So if I go back to object mode, we now have multiple objects. All right, good stuff. You'll notice here real quick, I'm gonna hide this one just by pressing H. This one, the orange dot is over here. So every object has an origin point. And I got to point this out real quick because the origin point is where it rotates from. And sometimes you don't want it to rotate from that origin point. And it also controls when things mirror. All right, maybe I want it to be a part of the actual geometry. So a quick kind of way to do this is you can go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, and it will do that number right there. Just keep that in mind. You can also position this origin point precisely with the 3D cursor. Now we're going to talk about this panel over here, and we're going to actually do the mirror a different way on this one. We're going to Tab, we're going to Edit, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn that on. We're going to delete these. So we're going to get back to this shape here. You see the origin point is way out here. Now check out how it affects the mirror when we do this using a modifier. There's all kinds of modifiers. I'm not going to go over all of them, but if I go into the modifier panel, the modifier panel here, and I do mirror, if I can read today, and I've mirrored it. It's on X. I'm going to turn X off. We're going to do Y. You'll see that it mirrors around the origin point there. So a quick, easy way to kind of fix this is you can go to separate, or you can select this edge here, right? And that's where we want it to mirror from. So we can do mesh, and we will go to, we're going to press Control Shift S, okay? And we are going to put cursor to active, okay? Cursor to active. Oh, nope, not cursor to active, sorry. Cursor to selected. You can change the active by holding shift. Let me talk about that real quick. So right now, this white edge is the active edge. If I hold shift and I select another edge and double click on it, it will become the active edge. It kind of does that little number there. So it works differently in object mode from edit mode, but it's pretty much the same thing. You're just going to have to kind of run around and click on things. Oh, you can just hold Alt in edit mode. That's what it is. So Alt selects that whole loop, and then you can, yeah, anyways. So once that loop's selected, press Shift, cursor to select it. It actually kind of rounds it all up. You can see it's placed it right in the center. That 3D cursor is there now. Okay. And then you can actually just go back into object mode. Go to Object, set Origin to 3D Cursor, and voila, you can now see that it married it up pretty well. And it's actually right here, you also have merge right here, so it's going to automatically merge it once again. All right, and that's created a much better mirror than doing it in edit mode, in my opinion. The 3D cursor itself, you can place in different areas. You can click on Mesh. It will place it there, somewhere in the view. And you can place this 3D cursor in different places. It's pretty cool because you can actually select, like, let's say an object here. Oop, we're going to go back to selection method, or the selection tool. Select this object here. Now, if we rotate it, it rotates around that origin point. We can still rotate around the 3D cursor. And all you have to do is click here and then click 3D cursor and then rotate. And you'll see that that 3D cursor is actually pretty useful, and it's a lot of fun to use sometimes, actually. All right. Everything in 3D space, though, does have a position on X, Y, and Z, and rotation and scale. Here's the trick. Press N, and you'll see that when you have an object selected, you have X, Y, and Z values. So every time you move a vertex, it will go up or down, right? And it has a position. You can also change them right here as well. That is important if you want to make things very precise and you want to keep them in certain areas. There's also some tabs, but most importantly is the view one. This is where the 3D cursor XYZ values are. So if you ever want to place this somewhere precisely, like at 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. Oh, let me talk about that too. It will actually place it there. This grid is a meter. Every grid space is a meter. So now everything's in metric in Blender to start with. This translates over to Ghost Recon really well. When you export as an OBJ file and bring it into 3D Studio Max as an OBJ file, you can actually get a one-to-one import and export, meaning that like whatever size it is in Blender, you can get it into 3D Studio Max as that size and then export it out to the game as the same size. So it takes a little bit of setup to do that, but it does work. But nonetheless, just because it's in metric doesn't mean you can't change things. So, for example, this 3D cursor right now, we're going to move it on, let's do Y values here. So maybe it's at -3 right now. Let's do -2. You'll see it's there. If I do +2, it goes to the other side of that axis. So everything's in negatives and positives. But you can also move things not just using metric. So if I put in 5 foot, it calculates it for you. It's like a little mini calculator. You don't even got to think about these kind of things. You can also do millimeters. So let's say I want to do 1,000 millimeters. But there you go. And that's all you do. You got to just remember, though, it's kind of particular on how it wants you to enter it. So 6 FT, okay, maybe something like that, or 12 inch maybe, something like that. But not, you can't do like 1,002 space foot. Oh, maybe you can. It wasn't working earlier, I swear. All right, so yeah, things like that you got to just pay attention to. And you can move things around in that manner. Now, for the most part, there's so many things that we could still probably discuss. I don't know. I tried to break down modeling. It's just, there's so much that goes into modeling when it comes to like topology and flow and everything else. It can be quite complicated. But there's one thing I wanted to talk about, and that is, I'm trying to think of it real quick. I just forgot it. Oh, it was, Oh, let's talk about another modifier actually, since we're here. We got the mirror one. We also have the array one, which is pretty important. I'm going to talk about this array one. Okay, so I had to cut the video and figure this out real quick. It's been a while since I've created an array using this, but I'm going to show you how to do this real quick. It's not too complicated. We're going to just start completely over. So if this was like a brand new scene, this is kind of what you could expect. We're going to create a cube, create mesh, cube. There we go. We're going to drag it out to the side. So G and X. We're just going to move it out to the side, all right? I'm going to actually snap it incrementally while I do this, just because I want it to line up kind of even on the grids here. All right, so we created this mesh. Now we got to create an empty. The 3D cursor is right there, so whatever you create is going to be created there. So I'm going to press Shift A, create empty plane axis. All right, now I want this to be curved all the way around it. So what's going to happen is I got to create an array, and I'm not going to change the factor at all. I'm going to put it at 0, and we have a count. Okay, but we're going to do an object offset, and we're going to use this empty as the object offset. So you can see it actually placed it right there, which is rather interesting and kind of hilarious, but it's now being used as the offset, basically. There's no other things here. Okay, we're good. We're going to bump it up to like 5 to start with. And this object here, we're going to do object set origin to, let's try 3D cursor real quick. Okay, so yeah, it's set to the 3D cursor. The 3D cursor and the object have to have the same origin point. Once that is achieved, you can rotate the empty. So press R and Z, and you can rotate now, like so. Try to get the spacing you want. You can hold control to do incremental spacing as well. So you can make this a lot easier on yourself. And then you can actually click the mesh again, you can actually change the count. You can bump it up to something like so. And that's how you create an array. That's it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but it does work that way. It also, if you didn't want to, like let's change this. We're going to go to, right here's the Z-axis. We're going to press 0. We can use this little menu here. This is object properties, but you can also press N to get to the item. So you can have that same list in both those areas. But if I wanted to rotate it in another direction, right, I can certainly do that. And I can also rotate it in the other direction as well. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can do things. It's completely on you. It's a little bit counterintuitive sometimes, but you can create like helixes and things like that. But for the most part, it's just creating a system like that. So yeah, the array system's pretty wild. It's a little bit tricky, but it does work, and now you know how to use it. So hopefully you get something from that as well. All right. I will talk about this one last thing, and then I'm going to end the video. I create a mesh here real quick just so I can have something to focus on. You do have your left and your right views. They go into orthographic modes. If you press, you're orbiting and you press Alt, it'll snap you into the closest one. So we got back orthographic. If I hold Alt, right orthographic, you can do things like that. You can set up background images. So I need an image here real quick just to reference, use as a reference. We're going to do an M4. Let's go to images. We'll grab this picture here, copy image. We'll paste it. Oh, I can't paste it. We'll just save it then, I guess. Save it on my desktop. Okay, so in a side orthographic view, what you can do is you can press Shift A and create image reference. All right. Find that image you just downloaded. In this case, this M4, and it will do that number like so. I just want to point this out in case you wanted to make weapons. I showed you quite a bit so far, but That's going to be your reference. If I go back into 3D view, you'll see it's like so. You can actually press G and X and move it back. Okay. And you might want to lock it in place. So this little panel here with all the locks, or right here as well, what you can do is you can just lock it all up. So you can't move it by accident if you're going to build off of it. It's pretty important that you do that. You can still select it, and that could be a little bit of a problem because I believe you can actually change the size of it still. Yeah, so you can see I can change the size by accident. I don't want to accidentally do that by any chance. So I'll go to this menu again, and under visibility, I will change it to not selectable. If I go back to this image tab, object data properties here, what you're going to notice is that it's in perspective. You can actually turn that off. So it only shows up when you go into orthographic, which is pretty cool. If you need that, that's just an option. A lot of times I don't even bother turning that on or off. It can only be axis aligned. So another thing like that. You can make it transparent if you need to. So you can make it very faint or very bright. Depends on how you want to use it. And if you're making mesh on top of it, you can't see it. You got to remember X-ray mode. And now you can see through your mesh. All right, so if I grab this whole piece of mesh and move it. Oh, when you're in orthographic mode, by the way, and you press G, as long as it's in orthographic, you won't mess up your position. It's only going to move up and down and left and right. But if you were in, what did I just do? Oh, I'm in edit mode. But if I was in, I got set to 3D cursor? Oh, I do. I'm going to change it back from 3D cursor to median point. Okay. But if I was in a different view and I press G, it will mess up your positioning of your model. So keep that in mind. And this is how you start modifying weapons. I really wanted to talk about doing weapons. I'll do a weapons tutorial, but I'll just get you started here. You know, and you can select faces that face down. So I can just press E, or down or forward. So press 3 and select faces like that. The little dots is what you're clicking on. And you can add loops, Control R. Select the face, extrude it down. Oops. You can do that number. Select the vertex. Move it where you need it. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do. It's really not too complicated, but this is pushing and pulling polygons or vertices or whatever you want to call it. And basically, more or less, I will define X and Y's and Z's sometimes when I do this, but I'm a little bit more careful with it. So you'll start doing things like this, pushing them around, lining them up. You can scale things together. So let's say I accidentally moved this one. It's like uneven now. I can take these vertices, press S, Z, and type in 0, and it will flatten them all on the Z axis. So you can do things like that as well. Grab like the back of the grip here. Maybe I want this whole section and not this. Press Control B, and I can bevel it. Probably hard for you to see like that, but I can bevel it out, something like so. You know, nothing too crazy. Grab the whole object, press S and X, and scale it, make it thinner. And you know, you can grab you can make a barrel. Go back into object mode real quick. So rotate on Z90, so RZ90. S, scale it down, bring it down. Yeah, you gotta basically select this object and this object. The light orange one is the active object, all right? If you hold shift, you can also select the other object. It'll turn light orange. So you can select the active object, go to object, and we are going to transform align objects. It shouldn't do nothing at first for you. You have to select align X, and then what'll end up happening is it does that number. You can also do Z or Y or whatever. If you hold shift, you can select the multiples. Set the relative to active align mode centers. Okay, and you'll get that number like that. So that's how you line things up real quick. What I'm going to do is go into edit mode, press S, scale, pull it up. Now I can go into my side view here. So maybe I want to make this guy real quick. Yeah, little bumps along the way in this tutorial, huh? Pretty long one, but hopefully you'll see that I can't actually move the back there. So we're going to turn on X-ray. And I know for a fact that the shape of this thing, although I'm not going to do the whole thing, is going to be something more like that. So you can see you can do these things and get away with it. And then maybe select each edge on each side, press Control B, and you can actually bevel them a little, or something like that, maybe. Like that. Yeah, so that's pretty much it when it comes to creating weapons and stuff. Like you're gonna push and pull polygons and make different shapes and cuts. Sometimes you have some weird things like on pistols. Like if this was a pistol, you might have a little area where there's a Picatinny rail at the bottom where that flashlight goes on. You can do like an Alt-E, extrude manifold. You'll see that it does something crazy like that. You might want to change this back to snap, increment. I think I changed it while the video was cut, but you might do global. Let's do Alt-E along, yeah, like that. This is where I was talking about, I think. You see how there's a little slant to it? Click offset even, and it'll get rid of that slant. So now you can actually do that extrusion like so. And you might want a loop like right here. You might want to make a rail here. And so there's just different ways to go about doing things. This is, I think, not the best way to do it, but it's the quickest perhaps. And I can't pull it out past the edge there because it's creating an n-gon. Unless I had created an edge right here. But I don't want to do that. I actually want to take this all the way around. All the way here to there. Over to here. And there. I'm using Control. And what that did is it allowed me to select the backside too. This is the shortest path selection. If I press G twice, I can slide it up. Auto merge is on, so it all merged. I can press G twice again if I wanted, and merge it up again. Things like that, you know, so you can create weird shapes real quick. But shortest path is basically you select somewhere and hold Control and left click, and it selects the shortest path to that area. And so what I don't find it useful going across large areas usually, unless I'm doing like I need to nurse something or select something on the backside. I might nurse it to here, so hold Control and it selects that whole edge, and I know it's going to take the shortest path through this and go back around over to here. So I might view it from this side. So like if I'm working here, I might just go click, and then now we know it's going to do that. You may not always know it's going to do that, but usually it'll get things like that done if you get used to using it. So like right now, this side's not selected, this side's not selected. Click there, there. See how I did? Easy selections. And then yeah, you can just keep creating things as much as you want and beveling them and making them more detailed. Weapons specifically are useful for beveling. I wouldn't say maps are all that much. This we're going to collapse down. We're going to optimize it real quick. Let me view it correctly. I'm going to delete both those faces. I need to delete the face because I'm going to actually collapse it into one another. So I'm going to switch it back to vertex and press G, hold Control, and you can see I do that number. G and Control, G and Control, and it's welding it at the same time, so you don't have to worry about going back and welding it. All right, that's created a cool n-gon on the bottom. See, GR doesn't mind n-gons usually if they're flat. It's just what it is. Now you're going to have flat faces unless you shade them smooth. If you're in object mode, right click, shade smooth. You'll see it does this number right here. And it's going to look pretty funked up. It's not horribly destroyed at this point. You can get some smoothing out of it to look correctly, but 3ds Max 5 has a better smoothing system, in my opinion, where you can use smooth groups. Blender, I don't know of any smooth groups in it. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But they both have a similar feature. So when you make an object smooth, you go to this object panel here. Oops. And we're going to go to, oh, maybe the wrong object panel. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, this little green one down here. It says object data properties. Check this out. Object properties, object data properties. And what's this one? Material properties. Okay. A lot of times the names are similar. But anyways, so this one, the little green triangle, normals, click auto smooth. And you'll see that as it is right now, we have 30-degree auto smooth. You can usually bump this up to like, pretty high levels. And it'll make the smoothing a little bit nicer for the most part, but maybe not perfect. Usually right below 90, and it's okay. So like 3ds Max 5 does have an auto smooth feature that's exactly the same, and so you'll be able to get away with things like this in Blender. So this is a little bit better modeled, and it doesn't have as many ingons and stuff. So as long as I'm below 90, you can see that it does auto smooth it quite well. I'm going to just give you an example of how that auto smooth looks on other objects. What do we got here in EOTech? So the auto smooth feature on this object ends up creating this result. It's just about how clean you are with your model. Creating really clean geometry with enough faces to support everything is going to give you that kind of a result. You can see the difference between what we were just doing and this, right? I also have another one in here, I think, in the folder. I got M4, that's it. So this was a 4-section. Same process. This is all one piece of geometry using sub-objects. So if I press L, you can see that's a sub-object. There's all kinds of different little objects in here. When you're working in edit mode with multiple objects like this, L is going to be extremely important, but so is hiding things. So keep this in mind. If I select this object and I press H, I'm in edit mode, all right? But I just hid that whole section. That was one object. So I can come in here and work on other objects. It's useful to not get too cluttered, and you can press Alt-H and unhide it. But sometimes it'll confuse you because you might be working on something, accidentally hit H, and then you'll go into object mode and you'll be like, yeah, it looks right. And you go into edit mode and you're like, where the heck is it? What's going on? Just remember, Alt-H gets rid of all the hidden objects, or brings all the hidden objects back, unhides them. And you'll end up doing that number. So then you can do a whole weapon, easy, right? One last, I know I keep going on and on. It's like rambling on. Statistics right here, this little arrow, statistics, that brings this up. I'm at 1,200 triangles. That's a lot of triangles for this piece of geometry. Faces of that 620. You don't need that kind of detail in 3D objects for Ghost Recon. There's no reason to try to match this. I mean, you don't need iron sights, sight posts, all this fun stuff. You really don't need that in GR. The only reason I do this is because that's just how I am with GR now. It can handle more polygons than it used to because everybody has super powerful graphics cards now. But GR itself, the weapons were only like 400, sometimes less, to 600 polygons or faces or edges or triangles or whatever you want to call it. Not edges, triangles. But I think they had everything triangulized. So like before they put in the game, they'd convert it to triangles anyways. But it was like 600. It wasn't nothing. It was like 600. And they use a lot of alpha maps and all kinds of other fun stuff for textures. We'll get into texturing later, but so I say keep it right at 1,000. Don't go crazy with it. This weapon's not even done. By the time it would be done, it'd probably be well over 2,000, close to 3,000. So this level of detail is not needed. Just keep that in mind. and you start adding things up like the EOTech with it. And the EOTech is 576 triangles, 278 faces. So, 1200 plus that, you're already at 1,000, and we haven't even got the body done, the trigger, the magazine, the buttstock, yeah, none of, or flashlight or grenade launcher, none of it. So, yeah, suppressor. You add all that up, it's like 5,000 polygons. This is a ridiculous amount of detail for Ghost Recon, unless you're making weapons like specifically for that first person weapons mod. I don't see no reason for all this, to be honest. And if you're making it for the first person weapons mod, this isn't, in my opinion, detailed enough. Maybe this EOTech is, but that M4 probably wasn't. So you figure something like that in game, that could be smoother a little bit. Nonetheless, hope you enjoyed this extremely long tutorial on how to use Blender. I try to cover as much as I can. I'm going to go over some other specific objects, maybe like how to do buildings or something, but in future videos, I'll be doing that. Just keep in mind, whatever you make here will have to go to 3ds Max 5 and then be exported into Ghost Recon. It's a little bit of a lengthier process, and if you do run into problems once it goes in a game, you're probably going to want to edit back in Blender and then report back into 3ds Max 5. It's not a big deal. I really prefer using Blender much more than Max 5, so I think it's more important to just learn this program and then learn the basics in the other one as well, so that way you can make this process a little bit more streamlined. It'll go a little bit faster. Oh, and I just realized I did not actually show you this smooth. This is all faceted right now, all flat facing. So I'm going to shade it smooth. You'll see that it does this number. It doesn't look horribly bad. Let's try auto smooth on it, and we'll bump it up a little bit. Just yeah, like 80, roughly 80. We'll turn off some of the shading. I had shading on in this one. This is called cavity shading here, I guess, and just turn that off. We'll play around with it. If the auto smooth isn't working, and this one's not working, what we can do is go to geometry data, and sometimes this is split normal data. So I'm going to click clear split normal data. Now the auto smooth will work. So something, yeah, 64 degrees seems to work pretty well, and it looks a little bit nicer. I think right about there. 60.3 seems pretty good as well. It keeps that edge sharp, which I don't mind, but these are rounded. This is mostly smooth throughout here, and so that looks quite a bit different than it did previously. Put cavity on, it's going to make it look more faceted again. It's usually the ridge that does that. Turn that ridge down. And these are shadows, so those can be interesting. So that gives you a little bit of shading. Now, what it's doing is it's ambient occlusion, screen space shading, basically, adding the little shadows in the corners and stuff. When I take a model and I texture it, what I will do is I will bake that shading into the model later on. And I'll show you how to do that as well. I think it makes it look a little bit nicer. Yeah, certainly. And that's it for this video, really. I don't have much else to talk about for just general overview of Blender and how to use it. We'll get into doing some specific objects later on, including texturing and UV mapping and all that fun stuff. But they'll be a little bit more simplistic, more simple objects there. Talk about doing texture atlases and things like that, and hopefully future tutorials as well. So thanks for watching.